Good morning. It's Roger here, also known as Tone Freaks. I am going to read the blog that I've done this morning, the other blog with the notes to it, and just make some comments. First of all, why am I making these comments? I'm making these comments because I think that enough is enough. I really got better things to do than talking into a webcam and all the rest of it. But if anything, it's to clear my own conscience. I mean, I'm cracking on with my own life, with my own business interests, and working my way through this obstacle course as best I can. We've all got to make the most of it, but we all really ought to be aware and wake up to the fact that what we're dealing with here is corporate fascism, monopoly state capitalism, and it's increasingly difficult to find an area of operation which isn't rigged and absolutely riddled with corruption. So I'm making this video because I don't know who said it, but someone said that evil prospers when, good men stand by and say nothing. So for what it's worth, this is my take. And I suggest that people do their own research and don't believe a word. Like the old Thin Lizzy song, don't believe a word. So let's get this screen up. This is it. This is the summary of what we're going to go into afterwards. So the current global power structure is driven by a complex web of alliances between various entities, including Wall Street, big oil and energy conglomerates, defense contractors, big pharma, biotech conglomerates, corporate media, telecom and digital technology giants, think tanks, lobby groups, research labs, and more. At the heart of this structure are the giant investment portfolio conglomerates such as BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, and Fidelity. These conglomerates control a combined $20 trillion in managed assets with a leverage power of 4 to 5-fold. The upper echelons of the US state apparatus are also involved in this power structure, including the Pentagon, US intelligence, the health authorities, Homeland Security, and the US State Department. The system is effectively one of dual sovereignty, since the sovereign powers of tax collecting and the corresponding issue of money is shared between the government and the banking cartel. It is time to recognize these narratives for what they are and work towards creating a more just society that benefits everyone. And everyone basically is 99.9% of humanity. Never mind eat the rich. The ruling class have been eating everybody else, and currently they're on dessert. And the dessert, whoever you are, great or good or whatever, you're on the menu unless you are serving the fascist cabal at the center of all of this, and this is what this blog gives an overview of. So it's summarized here by ChatGPT, the machine learning, not artificial intelligence, machine learning platform, which, as with any tool, you can make it do some useful things. But if you're looking for anything connected with the internet that doesn't have a human talking to you directly like I am now, what you have to know is it's absolutely lying to you. So anyway, here's the outline of what I'm about to read out. The introduction gives an explanation of the hegemonic power structure of global corporate fascism. That's what we're dealing with, state monopoly capitalism, and the importance of understanding the power structure, which is the framework within which global corporate fascism is seeking to reduce us all to a state of serfdom, slavery, enslavement, call it what you will. Take your soma and you'll believe you're free, or just enjoy that boot stamping on your face, a la 1984. The role of money and financial institutions in that framework there's the distribution of credit and rationing of that credit to a favoured in-group. The crucial part of the socio-political economic control mechanism, and this is a quote from Shubik, where it's the administrative means to collect taxes, direct investment, and provide public goods and regulate trade. So the control mechanism and the dynamics are in place to influence process. Equilibrium or some sort of invisible hand is not at work here. The hand is in front of a green screen. There is a hand. The wizard behind the curtain is this structure, which is alluded to and outlined in what I'm about to read. Money and financial institutions provide the command and control system of any modern society. Democracy and political decisions, which we consume endless narratives about, okay, is merely an institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions. The participation of minority elites within the ruling class is crucial, but the non-participation of us lot, the rest of us, is not required. We are to be apathetic, and we lack the feelings of political efficacy, and the ruling class believe that our apathy is essential to the maintenance of instability, or against instability, the maintenance of what they see as good little peasants behaving themselves, wearing their mouse suits. There has been a rush to techno-fascist feudalism since I call it the plandemic. I subscribe to the view that it was over-exaggerated at best, and a good crisis was not let to go to waste. The push within the plandemic towards a central bank digital currency tied to digital IDs is there for all to see. I think people should look closer at the Indian system of Aadhaar. Hardly anybody mentions it. The misallocation of resources and the credit tokens to acquire those resources is the job of the central banks, and the dominant resource which is controlled is the flow of resources and energy, so primary resources and energy through the economy. And the idea is to make us all believe that they're terribly scarce, and we need a pencil monitor. Rishi Sunak to me is no better than a little job's worth pencil monitor. We're all dealing with little stubs of pencils when the stock room is full of gleaming pencils of every conceivable colour, and we could all draw a beautiful picture of society if only the jumped up little twerp Sunak just got out the way, and his ilk, and I include Keir Starmer in that. Okay, they're know nothing, do nothing, done nothing, fascists. That's what they both are. I characterize them both as handmaidens to the fascist framework, and some of the people behind that framework, like Klaus Schwab, stroking his cat and all the rest of it, in probably one of the worst PR public relations decisions ever. Who would ever put that man in front of a camera, or his sidekick, Nurani, whatever he's called, the misanthropic gnome himself that thinks we humans are no better than dumb animals, which I assume his hero Henry Kissinger, he's just sort of reiterating what he's heard at the knee of his mentor, as it were. So priorities which are touted in the narratives, the number one is that there's a hard limit on available energy. I don't believe that's true. Investment in energy is limited to limit and give the the idea of artificial scarcity and basing the monetary unit on that to keep the monetary unit scarce is designed to keep the poor poor and obedient, and to keep down emerging economies that aren't chosen to be the conduit for extracting the wealth in other territories. The demonization of hydrocarbons, that's gas, oil, coal, and the other main source of energy that we're kind of quite good at, which is nuclear, is not explicable in any other way than that, unless you believe in fairy tales. But if you believe in fairy tales, you know, believe in fossil fuels, believe in that. It's a theory. It's not supported by evidence, and in fact, the evidence is quite the opposite of what the peak oil commissars were trying to get us all to believe in the noughties. That's the 2000s or whatever. So climate change, the climate crisis, otherwise known as the plague of humans, modern day front for fascist eugenics, that's used as the reason for standing down hydrocarbons. And I'm afraid to tell anyone that believes in that stuff that you know, you may as well be believing in fairies at the end of your garden. So the purpose of the fourth industrial revolution, of Build Back Better and all the rest of it, is to stymie the development of energy sources, to control populations and population growth, and in some instances to instigate rapid population decline in sections of the population who are not considered to be good little peasants. The power structure of global corporate fascism, as we've alluded to in the introduction, is a complex web of alliances between various entities, and the giant portfolio conglomerates, the spider, if you will, in the middle of that web, is the $20 trillion plus of assets under management, AUM, and our great leader, Larry Fink, is right at the heart of that. The World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, all these self-congratulating, self-referring criminals, parasites, self-identifying wealth creators. They're nothing of the sort. They are wealth destroyers. They are the destruction. They destroy commerce in local economies in the pursuit of monopoly power, state monopoly capitalism. Debt and GDP measures. These are the new necessary beliefs in our great fascist masters, and measures of debt, measures of GDP. They don't capture anything scientifically. They're not falsifiable. That is in the sense that they are arbitrary, and they're a belief system which no regard to actual resources and the potential of the allocation of resource inputs into an economy, and the available energy is basically, it's a state secret in the parts of the world that have been allotted the power of being the energy monitors, as it were. So the political choices for how the world deploys its commons in terms of energy and natural resources and all the rest of it there are lots of political choices that can be made. There are lots of alternative systems. It's not true to say, well, all the systems are bad. Democracy, Churchill's favourite quote about democracy is the worst, is a terrible system, but it's the worst of a bunch, sort of thing. Same with economics, and capitalism is the best. There are lots of flavours of capitalism that effectively things that work in terms of the way that we would all think was fair are they're not allowed, they're taboo. So something like Henry George's single land tax proposals, for instance, they don't get any consideration these days. Or Hilaire Belloc and G.K. Chesterton's distributism, for instance, and there are others, Major Douglas's social credit. There are differences between all these different things. What they have in common is that they are not discussed in the priesthood, otherwise known as the Academy of Economics. And then the other thing we should note is that the petrodollar is already an energy-based unit of account. It's just that carbon footprints is a better way to ration it and get people to really believe in being rationed for the religious pursuit of our great Gaia, etc. It's a religious movement tacked onto a fascist socio-political movement. So a paradigm shift in the thinking about prosperity is needed, and the forces railed against that are the military-industrial complex, so US military and NATO. They're not peacekeepers around the world. They promote and actively provoke war. They're not forces for good in the world. The International Bank of Settlements, which is the central bank of central banks, and their debt-based fiat currency system, and all factions in the ruling class, this fascist cabal, we're sort of supposed to think that East Asia doesn't like Oceania and vice versa. The one thing they have in common is that they both see their populations as the enemy. They've more in common with each other than the interests of their own populations, to varying degrees according to the winds of pushback in any particular time. So in conclusion, Zappa's famous quote, "The illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to maintain it." Well, with central bank digital currencies and the degree of control that Larry Fink, Schwab, the rest of them think they've got at the moment, it is no longer profitable, so look out. It's essential to unlearn erroneous but pervasive assumptions and principles which have been taught to us to promote the private interests of the ruling class and the things that we think a state is, or an economy is, or a government is, a politician is, that nice Mr. Capitalist, Mr. Buffett, for instance, or something like that. So challenging these self-evident beliefs, as it were, is necessary for progress towards a brighter future and more prosperity for our families and our neighbours. So that's the overview, and now I'm going to read that in longhand. So, the hegemonic power structure of global corporate fascism explained, part 1. In today's world, the concept of power is not often associated with money and financial institutions' main role, which is to distribute credit and ration it to a favoured in-group. The monetary and financial system of an economy is a crucial part of the socio-political economic control mechanism used by every state to connect the economy with the polity and society. This neural network provides the administrative means to collect taxes, direct investment, provide public goods, and trade. The money measures provide a crude but serviceable basis for the accounting system, which in turn, along with the codification of commercial law and financial regulation, is the basis for economic evaluation and the measurement of trust and fiduciary responsibility among the economic agents. A central feature of the control mechanism is that it is designed to influence process. Dynamics is its natural domain. Equilibrium is not the prime concern. The ability to control the direction of motion is what counts. Money and financial institutions provide the command and control system of a modern society. The study of the mechanism, how they are formed, how they are controlled and manipulated, and how their influence is measured in terms of social, political, and economic purpose pose questions, not in pure economics, not even in narrow political economy, but in the broad compass of a political economy set in the context of society. Democracy is that institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions in which individuals acquire the power to decide by means of a competitive struggle for the people's vote. However, this theory is centered on the participation of the minority elite that is crucial, and the non-participation of the apathetic ordinary man, lacking in the feelings of political efficacy that is regarded as the main bulwark against instability. So this is the so-called elite, the ruling class, fear of the mob. And hey, guess what? That mob, we're all in it as far as they're concerned. We're the useless eaters and the great unwashed. The driving motivation behind the accelerated rush to techno-fascist feudalism has been occupying my mind for years. In the financialized economy and with the central bank digital currency push tied to digital IDs, we see a symptom of the appearance of what the system is trying to preserve, namely itself and its monopoly in-group. The real economy is put in the position of trying to make bricks without straw, a misallocation of resources and of the credit tokens to acquire those resources. The dominant resource tying the financial system's real potential for the real economy is the flow of energy resources and primary resources through the economy. It would seem from the surface narrative that a hard limit on available energy to sustain the present industrial output of the global economy has been hit. What seems inexplicable on that explanation is the priorities touted in narratives regarding why our largest energy sources, the hydrocarbons, gas, oil and coal, and the largest potential replacement for them, nuclear, are being demonized, or more properly described as being stood down. Why? Why is that? Climate change, the climate crisis, or do they really mean by that the plague of humans? What does the Great Reset, the Green New Deal, or Going Direct address? And to whose benefit? The purpose of the Fourth Industrial Revolution is to stymie the development of energy resources and control population and growth of the economy, and instigate a rapid population decline. Build Back Better, Going Direct, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution are all political slogans of the trilateral World Government Party, which represents only the hybridized elite billionaire class and their lackeys. Differential accumulation is their only concern, and also, of course, population control. It makes them feel powerful. The key fact in the new development of plutocracy is that it will use its own blunder as an excuse for further crimes. Everywhere, the very completeness of impoverishment will be made a reason for further enslavement, though the men who impoverish were the same who then go on to enslave. It's as if a highwayman not only took away a gentleman's horse and all his money, but then handed him over to the police for tramping without visible means of subsistence. And the most monstrous feature is this enormous meanness may be noted in the plutocratic appeal to science, the science, rather to the pseudoscience that they call eugenics, or climate change, the science. That's a quote actually from G.K. Chesterton in the Servile State. So the rules-based international order of the New World Order narratives have been driving globalization and urbanization for decades. The petrodollar hegemony and the narrative of addiction to oil, and for addiction to oil, read addiction to expressions of debt-based central bank liabilities. That green thing there will link to a 57 excerpt of Carstens, who's the general manager of the Bank of International Settlements, explaining exactly what the central bankers are interested in terms of programmable central bank digital currencies. These narratives have been driving and shaping global politics with buzzwords like man-made global warming, now climate change, overshoot, overpopulation, elitism. Oh wow, we're all going to bow down and worship the elites. We want to be like them. And they've been used to control populations in a bread and circuses orgy of distractions, which has accelerated with the enclosure of the internet by big tech monopolies, the rise of social media, which should probably be called anti-social media. COVID-19 was a distraction at best. The main currents of where we are now date back to policies which followed the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1990. Then we had the dot-com bubble in 2000, that condensed the internet. Then you had 9/11 and 7/7. So that's the fear, the promotion of fear, of they hate our freedoms, so forth. Then we had the 2008 global financial crisis. In the UK, then we had the 2010 coalition. But this sort of thing has gone all over the world. Temporary people, elections cancelled. How the hell Sadiq Khan is still the mayor of London. You've just seen Rutte, his government collapsing in Holland. The story in the BBC is saying, oh, it's because he wasn't getting his way on unchecked immigration, nothing to do, of course, with the Dutch farmers. These are all milestones on a guided tour you can take of the false narratives, occulting, that's obscuring, blotting out, hiding away the route we're really on, which is the road to serfdom. So, the hegemonic power structure of global fascism explained, part 2. So, in today's world, the power structure of global corporate fascism is a complex web of alliances between various entities, including Wall Street, big oil and energy conglomerates, defense contractors, big pharma, biotech conglomerates, corporate media, telecom and digital technology giants, think tanks, lobby groups, research labs. It goes on, it's endless. The ownership of intellectual property also plays a central role in this structure. That's to do with false barriers to entry, of false narratives of scarcity. Artificial scarcity is the thing to search on Wikipedia on that one. So at the heart of this complex network are the giant investment portfolio conglomerates such as BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street and Fidelity. And these organizations are all fronted by individuals. Okay, they're not sort of this autonomous invisible hand. There are individuals at the heart of all of these power structures and all of these frameworks. And if you want to change these things, then we have to change both the framework of the structures, but the people who are given their control levers. With so many of these things, it's a double-edged sword, and the interests in whom these people are working is actually quite a key question. But rest assured, it's not in your interests. So these conglomerates control a combined $20 trillion and rapidly rising in managed assets with a leverage power of 4 to 5-fold. So you're talking 80 to 100 trillion. This gives them a leverage in excess of the world's gross domestic product, which is about $82 trillion. Make no mistake, they are the spider at the heart of this fascist web. The upper echelons of the US apparatus are also involved in this power structure, including the Pentagon, US intelligence. I mean, in the UK, it's GCHQ, you know, the what they call themselves, the nudge unit, the behavioral insights team. It's ubiquitous across our life experience at the moment is the nanny state, but the nanny state has developed what's that, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, you know, where the nanny is murdering the child. That's these people are paranoid. These people are literally insane. So the US State Department, including embassies in 150 countries, the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank, the IMF, the World Bank, of course, the Bank of England, regional development banks, and the Basel-based Bank of International Settlements, BIS, and also the man who ate all the pies, Mr. Carstens. So the system is effectively one of dual sovereignty, since the sovereign powers of tax collecting and the corresponding issue of money is shared between the government and the banking cartel. This is the most distorting aspect of tax policy, but also the understanding of the undermining, dissolution, dissolving of democracy and our democratic institutions. The system is based on debt and GDP measures that do not capture anything scientifically falsifiable. They're subjective in the truest sense and have no regard for actual resources and potential resource outputs from available energy and resource imports. Debt in energy terms is borrowing future energy and using it up so that it is not available in the future. In a great sense, this energy future budget is unknown, with proven reserves and existing known generating and refining and conversion capacities in which we're underinvesting. But until a sensible measure of debt based upon known future energy resources and a fixed unit of energy are employed, their rate of use using future supplies of reserves now instead of some point in the future can't be measured. Any comparison becomes meaningless. Now that's a real cork sniffy point about the unit of currency. The person who's tackled this more that I'm aware of is Wes. If you search Twitter for the Big Apple plan, you'll find Wes and his proposed unit of currency, which is energy based. But as I said, it's an overview, so I'm trying not to get sucked into details. I have got answers, I have got sources, I have got a huge amount of research and argument over the last 14 or 15 years, which I'm more than happy to discuss with anyone. So sometimes it's hard not to be sort of to disappear down different areas that, say, I find particularly interesting, or other areas which you feel you need to elaborate on. So anyway, the current unit of currency as employed in the priesthood of economics is effectively meaningless. So there are lots of political choices that can be made in respect of how we deploy energy and primary resources. As a commons, Henry George with his single land tax showed how a use it or lose it approach to land with his single land tax could be beneficial, and those proposals would lead to land being deployed to its full and best capacity. Maybe we can look at energy resources in a similar way. What I object to is there is no alternative. We will brook no discussion. You're not an expert. You're not an whatever. I happen to be an expert in land economy. I'm a chartered surveyor, and so I do happen to know a lot about both the financial system and also the system of land ownership in common law territories like the UK or the US, for instance. But a discussion is not being had. People who it affects most are excluded from that discussion and encouraged in their apathy by the very design of that system. So the military-industrial complex expressed as the US military and NATO is one of the two groups that clearly emerge as key to the process of some sort of paradigm shift in thinking about prosperity and access to energy. They're a big obstacle to getting away from the arbitrary debt-based finance, and they're not a force for good. The other group is the International Bank of Settlements and its debt-based fiat currency system, which is intimately related to access to energy resources. Now, these two groups at the moment, according to the narratives, are ranged against the BRICS nations and states that are not aligned to the Washington consensus. Well, my question is, are they really ranged against each other? It's not left, right. It's not Oceania, East Asia. Okay, it's them and us. And the us are all the regular folks. 99.9% of us in truth. And I'm afraid we've got to reference George Carlin's old bit that it's a great big club and we ain't in it. So the problem with debt and GDP is that they do not capture anything scientifically falsifiable. I've said it once, I'll say it again. They don't capture anything scientifically falsifiable. No, they don't. They really don't. They're subjective in the truest sense and have no regard for actual resources and potential resource outputs from the available energy and resource inputs. False scarcity and monopoly control of perpetual political power and economic power, as opposed to energy power, as it were, are the objectives of world governance. Don't make any mistake about that. And the policy goals are working just fine. Do we see less centralization, less monopoly, less consolidation? No, we don't. And that's the objective. So the real policies are working just fine. They're working just fine. And the problems that we're told are existing and the solutions to their problems are because this centralization has pretty much gone as far as it can go without revealing the brick wall at the back of the theatre, to go to the Zappa quote again. So at this point, there are lots of political choices that can be made with respect to energy as a commons or money as a commons. Henry George with the single land tax showed that with his use it or lose it approach to land, and the single land tax proposals would lead to land being used in its best capacity and actually being used rather than hoarded, and encouraging the idea of this false narrative of scarcity. So this is the point again. Key point, obviously, can we look at energy resources or other resources in a similar way? One thing's for sure, the current system is not set up for efficiency. It's set up for absolute authoritarian control and rationing. So in one sense, the petrodollar is already an energy-based unit of account. So this might surprise you. Actually, counting carbon isn't a daft idea. Rationing carbon is a daft idea, but using it as a proxy for your energy use and an unfalsifiable currency unit isn't daft. And again, that requires a little bit more unpacking, which I'm not going to do right now, but you'll find lots of stuff about that. There's a blog on my other blog called 6 Ways to Sunday about carbon currency endgame. So right, where are we? But the birth of the petrodollar at its conception was to provide a means of recycling oil revenue surpluses of OPEC into dollar claims on hard assets and Western technology and consumer goodies and armaments, and ensuring, according to Calvin's dictum, that the poor should remain poor so that they remain obedient, including other countries that have oil. Taking an energy-based outlook, even with the great need of OPEC producers to exchange their finite resource, so-called finite resource, for longer-term prosperity generators, the short-term nature of petrodollar recycling must bring with it some regrets upon reflection some 45 years later. I read a report 2 years ago now, or at the beginning of COVID, by the Finnish government, or the geotechnical, or the Finnish Department for Energy and stuff, and they characterised governments in the Middle East as being non-peak oil literate, now, which, apart from being incredibly condescending and not to say a little racist, was a bit of an eye-opener, really, to how clever these people think they are and how dumb they think everybody else is. Well, here we are. Here's a heads up. Fool me once, shame on me. Fool me twice, shame on you. So shame on you if you don't respond to this wake-up call, wherever you are in the world. So two groups clearly emerge as key to the process of some sort of paradigm shift in thinking about prosperity as energy-based and not finance-based. And that's finance based on debt. These two groups are the International Bank of Settlements and the military-industrial complex, expressed as the US military and NATO. And this makes this point again about how the BRIC states are supposed to be aligned against the Washington Consensus states. So you've got these two factions, and the point is these factions have rather more interests in common against their populations rather than against each other, which is a theme in 1984, and that is Oceania ranged against East Asia in perpetual war, actually perpetrating the same fraud upon both of their populations. So the illusion of freedom will continue as long as it's profitable to continue the illusion. At the point where the illusion becomes too expensive to maintain, they will just take down the scenery. They will pull back the curtains. They will move the tables and chairs out of the way, and you will see the brick wall at the back of the theatre. Frank Zappa said that. He also advised against eating yellow snow, which was also wise advice. So it's essential to unlearn erroneous but pervasive assumptions and principles that are exclusively devoted to promoting private ruling class interests. The object of furthering public interest, even where it may conflict with private interests, is what we used to call public service. Sadly, corruption ensures that ruling class private interests usually dominate analysis and debate, more so now than ever. The challenge is significant, but necessary for progress towards a more sustainable future, prosperous future. I think a more prosperous future is a much better word than sustainable. Sustainable is polluted by these fascist frameworks and narratives, I think. So a more prosperous future. It's essential to recognize that money and financial institutions provide a command and control system for modern society. The study of these mechanisms and their influence on social, political, and economic purposes poses critical questions that must be addressed in a political economy set in society's context. The current global power structure is driven by a plutocracy that seems to maintain itself by controlling energy resources and population growth through eugenics. Eugenics is the model for all of this, population control and breeding. The narrative of globalization and urbanization has been used to control populations while maintaining petrodollar hegemony and the addiction to oil narrative. It's time to recognize these narratives for what they are and work towards creating a more just, prosperous society that benefits everyone. A fair crack of the whip, a meritocracy, if you will. So here we are. Well, it looks like we've got ourselves a global corporate fascist power structure, guys. Brilliant. Oh, fancy that. I mean, who needs democracy when you can have a complex web of alliances, including Wall Street, big oil, defense contractors, and the like? Let's not forget the giant investment portfolio conglomerates leveraging their powers in excess of world gross domestic product. I mean, talk about overcompensating for their inadequacies. You know, there's an Aesop's fable, and it says more always wants more. You know, it's never enough. So seriously, who needs science and actual resources when you've got debt and GDP measures that are subjective in the truest sense? You know, why have reason? Why have things that make sense when we can believe in utter nonsense? Let's demonize hydrocarbons, gas, oil, coal, CO2, nitrogen, all of the things that we need. You know, the film Idiocracy comes to mind. You know, Brando, it's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes. Wake up! Wait, this is you know, demonizing hydrocarbons, gas, oil, and coal, and demonizing CO2 is insanity. Okay, so you know, while we're at it, climate change. You know, damn that plague of humans. Am I right? You know, let's have the 5 minutes of hate. Oh, you know, plague of humans, you naughty human, you naughty human. So don't get me started on the illusion of freedom. Frank Zappa warned us about the brick wall at the back of the theatre. But hey, as long as it's profitable to maintain the illusion, you know, we'll keep on going. Well, that's stopped, hasn't it? So in all seriousness, it's time to recognise these narratives for what they are and work towards creating a more prosperous society, a more meritocratic society, a more no one left behind society. You know, Churchill's net below which no one can fall sort of society. One that has conservative values, but one that also has accepting, you know, it's not rocket science, people. You know, I mean, I'm going to be crude now. You know, first rule of life: don't be a cunt. I mean, it's as simple as that. So let's unlearn those erroneous assumptions and principles and promote public interest over private interests. As far as it goes with your neighbour's liberty and your own liberties and all the rest of it. So that's not a call to, oh, let's all be a bunch of commies or something like that. But what it's saying is, we all want to live in a nice neighbourhood, and we all want to look after each other and our own environment. Of course, we all want to do that. Of course, we all want to do that. But we're being prevented by doing that by these global plutocratic state monopoly fascists. Come on, people. Let's get to it. Let's tackle this. So this blog, on my other blog here, is what I based that on. And I wrote this Iron Law of Oligarchy. It's the first serious blog I put together. My blog was a notebook up to this point, and I, occasionally I'll try and write something which is, for people to read. I don't care if people read my blog or not. It's not for other people. It's for my own research. But occasionally I do write things thinking, well, I'd quite like people to read this. So that one I just read, I'd quite like people to read. This one, the Iron Law of Oligarchy, I genuinely do think it's worth reading. And so this is what I just read out here. What I did was I used as an input into ChatGPT quotes from this series of blogs, which are over a time period. And these quotes that follow all come from this line of blogs. So what I'm going to do now is just read through these. So this is part 2. So bear with me. This is a poem called Money by Philip Larkin. Quarterly it is, money reproaches me. Why do you let me lie here wastefully? I am all you never had of goods and sex. You could get them still by writing a few checks. So I look at others, what do they do with theirs? They certainly don't keep it upstairs. By now they've a second house and car and wife. Clearly money has something to do with life. In fact, they've a lot in common if you inquire. You can't put off being young until you retire. And however you bank your screw, the money you save won't in the end buy you more than a shave. I listen to money singing. It's like looking down from long French windows at a provincial town. The slums, the canal, the churches, ornate and mad. In the evening sun, it is intensely sad. The monetary and financial system of an economy are part of the socio-political economic control mechanism used by every state to connect the economy with the polity and society. This neural network provides the administrative means to collect taxes, direct investment, provide public goods, trade. The money measures provide a crude but serviceable basis for the accounting system, which in turn, along with the codification of commercial law and financial regulation, are the basis for economic evaluation and the measurement of trust and fiduciary responsibility among the economic agents. A central feature of a control mechanism is that it is designed to influence process. Dynamics is its natural domain. Equilibrium is not the prime concern. The ability to control the direction of motion is what counts. Money and financial institutions provide the command and control system of a modern society. The study of the mechanism, how they are formed, how they are controlled and manipulated, and how their influence is measured in terms of social, political, and economic purpose, pose questions not in pure economics, not even in a narrow political economy, but in the broad compass of a political economy set in the context of society. Martin Schubeck. Democracy is that institutional arrangement for arriving at political decisions in which individuals acquire the power to decide by means of a competitive struggle for the people's vote. Joseph Schumpeter, quoted from Roy Madron, Super Competent Democracies, who in turn cites Participation and Democratic Theory by Carol Pateman. Dr. Pateman says that Schumpeter and his followers set the current Anglo-American political system as our democratic ideal, with a democratic theory that in many respects bears a strange resemblance to the anti-democratic arguments of the last, i.e. 19th century. No longer is democratic theory centered on the participation of the people. In the contemporary theory of democracy, it is the participation of the minority elite that is crucial, and the non-participation of the apathetic ordinary man, lacking in the feelings of political efficacy, that is regarded as the main bulwark against instability. Chapter 6, Science and the Eugenicists. The key fact in the new development of plutocracy is that it will use its own blunder as an excuse for further crimes. Everywhere, the very completeness of the impoverishment will be made a reason for the enslavement, though the men who impoverished were the same who enslaved. It is as if a highwayman not only took away a gentleman's horse and all his money, but then handed him over to the police for tramping without visible means of subsistence. And the most monstrous feature in this enormous meanness may be noted in the plutocratic appeal to science, or rather to the pseudoscience they call eugenics. So that's G.K. Chesterton in The Servile State. Talk about centralization. The credit system, which has its focus in the so-called national banks and the big money lenders and users surrounding them, constitutes enormous centralization and gives this class of parasites the fabulous power not only to periodically despoil industrial capitalists, but also to interfere in the actual production in a most dangerous manner. And this gang knows nothing about production and has nothing to do with it. Karl Marx, Capital, Volume 3, Chapter 33, which is entitled The Medium of Circulation in the Credit System. So that's pages 554 to 45 of the Progress Press edition. What is the direction of travel and main narrative embedded in the narrative of the last 40 years? The rules-based international order or New World Order narratives. Number 1, globalization and urbanization. Number 2, petrodollar hegemony, addiction to oil. 3, man-made global warming. 4, overshoot of overpopulation. 5, elitism and star-fucking worship of the elites. The driving motivation behind the accelerated rush to techno-fascist feudalism has been occupying my mind for the years leading up to the repo spike in New York in September 2019. In the financialized economy and with the CBDC push tied to digital IDs, we see a symptom of the appearance of what the system is trying to preserve, namely itself and its monopoly in-group. The real economy is put in the position of trying to make bricks without straw, a misallocation of resources and the credit tokens to acquire those resources. The dominant resource tying the financial system's real potentials in the real economy is the flow of energy resources and primary resources through the economy. It would seem that a hard limit on available energy to sustain the present industrial output of the global economy has been hit. What seems inexplicable is the priorities touted in narratives regarding why our largest energy sources, the hydrocarbons, gas, oil and coal, and the largest potential replacement for them, nuclear, are being demonized. It is more properly described as being stood down. Why? Climate change, the climate crisis, the plague of humans? The purpose of the fourth industrial revolution is to stymie the development of energy resources and to control population and growth and instigate rapid population decline. The cakes currently burning King Alfred style were placed in the oven in the pivotal period 2015 election, February 2016 oil price low, 2016 Brexit Trump elections, 2017 election, September 2008 repo spike 2019, and then so the repo spike in 2019 and there was then the election at the end of 2019, then COVID-19. COVID-19 is a distraction. The main currents date back to policies following the breakup of the Soviet Union in 1990, from which then followed on dot-com bubble, 9/11, 7/7, 2008 global financial crisis, and the 2010 coalition. Those are the milestones that I referred to. Build Back Better, Going Direct, and the Fourth Industrial Revolution are political slogans of the trilateral world government party, which represents only the hybridized elite billionaire class and their lackeys. Differential accumulation is their only concern, and also, of course, population control. This came from a review I wrote of a book written by a bloke called Macintosh, which is a really crap book. And I compare it with another book by a guy called Carey King, which is on the same subject. It is a better book, but it's equally dishonest in lots of ways. So I'm just going to flick through this now. I want to finish my coffee. Size of the Dollar Moon. It's a poem that I wrote in 2016. This is a blog I did a month or two about not having two weights in your bag. It's a quote from Deuteronomy. So these quotes here are in a blog that I did where I put together a bunch of quotes, and this is a more sort of abstract way of doing what I've just done in reading that other thing. So I mean, do please put any questions. I will respond either in the description to the in the video if you see it, or more people will see this on my BitChute channel, because I am very, very severely shadow banned. Have a great weekend. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. I'm, as usual, working this weekend. This is what I'm going to be working on next. So Hematic's dashboard, build to rent, marketing strategy and context. And I've been doing a deep dive on house builders, corporate shareholders, apparent changes in policy, etc. There's a consultation going on with house builders and the government at the moment, and I've been reading some very interesting submissions to that, not least from the House Builders Federation, which is 114 pages long, would you believe? But that's what I do for a living. I'm a property developer. I'm not a bleeding heart liberal. I'm not left or a right or anything. I'm a businessman. I just believe in meritocracy and a fair crack of the whip. As I said at the very beginning of all of this, frankly, I don't give a fuck. If you can't speak your mind and criticize the powers that be, then fuck me if I'm not going to speak out about that. Bollocks to that and bollocks to them. Thanks for watching. Oh, dear God, I don't think that's worked.